All right, so let's fit the back of your raglan shirt. I'm going to give you a few options here. I'm going to show you how to adjust this little area that's really high up on the neck and down here in the middle of your back as well. And both of those adjustments, I can show you how to keep the center back still on the fold. And then I have one more that if you want to put a center back seam in, or yours does have a center back seam, I'm going to show you how to do these adjustments for a pattern that has that. So the raglan, in my opinion, is a pretty tricky pattern to fit. I mean, you can even just see how the sleeve just sticks straight out. So if you're having trouble fitting your raglan, I'm not surprised. So let me show you a few things that'll help you get more comfortable right here. So I'm also going to show you how to do these both directions. So if you have fullness on your back or the shirt's just too tight back there, I'm going to show you how to alleviate that. Or if your back is flatter or concave, or the pattern is just really baggy, I'm going to show you how to adjust that as well. So on this one right here, we can see that this isn't meeting right there and that this is going up on the neck a little bit. This is a half size form, so this would be quite a bit if this was a life size form. We're going to take a cut right here at the base of the neck seam. I don't have seam allowance along this neck, so we're going to pretend like there's seam allowance there, and we're going to cut right along there straight toward the sleeve seam. Now you can see I just cut right there along the base of the neck, straight over to there. And now we can see that if we lift this up, we get that little wedge in there, and it'll make it a lot more comfortable. And it'll also allow this to drop down a little bit like that. And then we can see also that by doing that now, this drops this front area down, and it'll be a little bit more comfortable on the back there. Now, if you are experiencing a lot of extra fabric here, you can pull this down as well. So pull it down and pinch that out, that excess. All right, let me show you how to do this on the lower back here. All right, this one too, it's going to be really tight across your back here if your back is a little rounded, or maybe the shirt is really shallow here. If it's the reverse and maybe you have a concave back or flat back, you're very erect, or the pattern's just really baggy back there, we can get rid of a lot of this excess here. So I'm going to show you how to find out that amount that you need. So let's say that you do have a rounded back or prominent shoulder blades, or maybe the shirt's just really tight back here, especially right in this area. It's pulling to the back, you know, like that. We're going to make a couple of cuts here. We're going to cut one right where we want it. So we want the fullness to be in that area. You know best where you need that. If you're needing extra in the garment, I would focus on where your shoulder blades are, if that's where it feels like you need the fullness. Or if you feel like it's just too much fabric, focus on wherever that needs to be and put the first cut there. We're going to go straight over to the sleeve seam again. See how straight I can cut these? Okay, just like that. And now the next cut we're going to do is going to go from the neck down to that cut there. So let's just set this out of the way there. All right, so this adjustment is going to keep your center back on the fold. So we're going to first just let this be right where it was, right? We'll put our pin there. And then we're going to raise this up where we need this to be. And we're going to keep this little area here right along the center back there so that we can keep our fold. And we'll let this open up, creating a little dart. And then that'll let the front fall down here to the front. And then now we can mark this amount for our dart and our center back there for our pattern change. I would put a little piece of paper back there and just tape the fabric directly to it. That might be the easiest thing. Or you can pin some fabric back there. If you're doing this to yourself, it can be kind of tricky. You might have to experiment. And all these changes that we're going to do to the raglan can be done on men's and women's, and it can be done on stretch and non-stretch items. All right, let me show you those pattern changes. I'm going to show you two main adjustments for this upper and mid area of the raglan. I'm going to show you one that will either address a flat or concave back. I'm going to show you one right here in the upper area that you can use to address a flat or concave area or a rounded area of your back. And down in this lower area, I'm going to show you one to address the same thing, flat, concave, or rounded area. Both those changes will allow you to keep the pattern on the fold. and it won't affect your pattern pieces going to your sleeve or your side seam, your waist. One of them is going to create a little neck dart, so that won't also affect your neck or your collar pieces. So none of these changes will affect your pattern pieces, maybe slightly, but mostly negligible. And I'm going to show you one last change if you have a center back seam or you want to put a center back seam in so you can get a really nice molded back here. I'm going to show you that at the very end. All right, let's do it. All right, so for this high area on the back neck, you're going to square a line right here at the neck seam, just straight across. And this might land in different places depending on your raglan because of the depth of the neck here. It could be lower and your line would be down here or higher. So, all right, we're going to create a hinge right here. So we're going to cut from the center back out to here to the seam line. Right on that neck edge there. And then we'll cut up to the hinge, just like that. We'll place a piece of paper behind this, and we're going to tape the lower edge here. Pick up the paper, tape right under there. So now we're going to continue this center back line along the back, just like this. And we're going to mark on the center back line exactly how much we want to raise. In this area here, you're not going to raise this more than like maybe a fat 1/2 inch. If you need to do more than that, you probably need to add it to the lower area as well. All right, so we're going to tilt this little piece up to meet that new line there, just like that. And then we'll tape it. And now once we trim all these other edges here, we should be right back where we were. All these pieces will match your current pattern pieces that sew to these edges, just like this. We shouldn't have changed anything along the neck or the armhole here. Your sleeve will still sew to this, and all of your collar and any collar pieces will still sew to this neckline here. You might notice a change if you have a facing that's laying along this edge. So I would lay your facing on there and make sure that it's still the same shape. Add a little paper or trim off of your facing if it's not exactly this shape anymore, because this did kind of raise it. So let's look at our difference here. So this was our original. And you can see that we raised this up a little bit and we pulled this away. So this is going to give more space to this upper area there. All right, now we want to flatten this little area up at the top here. We're going to do roughly the same thing, but just the other direction. So we're going to square a line across right there at that top of the neck there. We're going to put a hinge right here, and we're going to start cutting at the center back, straight across, and then up to your hinge. And now let's draw a line where we want to pinch out. So we're going to go down along the center back here from our cut line. So let's say we want to do that much. And like I said, you don't want to do much more than a 1/2 inch with this change. All right, now we're going to pick up this neck edge and we're going to pull it down to that new line there. Make sure it lays still flat here. You don't have any buckling. And now if you have some paper sticking out right here above your neckline, we're just going to trim that off, because this is our new cut edge right here. And you can see it spread apart a little bit here. So if you need to add a little paper here, if you need to smooth out this curve, go for it. But the seam line itself hasn't changed the length, so the sleeve will still sew to it. And let's compare. So you can see that's our old one, it's above, so let's slip it under so we can see the difference. And see, now it's pulled down a little bit and also over right here, so changing this little angle and pinching out a little, sort of like a little dart right there across your upper back. All right, so for like a lower rounded back or a flat back issue, we're gonna do kind of the same thing we do on the set-in sleeve, but we're only going to be able to make our change going toward the neck, because we don't really have a shoulder seam like we do on the set-in. We have 2 options. We only have 1 here. So you want to place this first cut line where you need this the most, or where you need to take it out the most. So we're going to put our line straight across there. And now we're going to draw a line from our neck down to that point as well. And I usually just kind of pick a place kind of in the middle, just stay away from the center and the shoulder line there, just like that. And we're going to put 2 hinges here. We're going to put a hinge here, and we're going to put a hinge here. So we're going to cut from center back to there, and neck down to the hinge there. So let's get a piece of paper ready. So the first one I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to add more space here as if it's a low round back. So we're going to do 1 cut here, do our hinge. I'm going to tape this bottom cut edge to the paper first. Just get this out of the way as best I can here. Like that. And now we're going to make our other cut. I'm going to move it out of the way of my paper. So we're going to go straight down right up to that cut line there. Next we're going to continue our center back line here, just right in a straight line there. And now let's mark on this line exactly how much we wanted to add. So here comes the fun part. Now we're going to pull this edge right here over to that new place, and we're going to keep this line straight. So you can line it up on a grid like this, but most likely you can just lay it against a ruler. So I'm going to push the lower part of the garment against the ruler here. And this little guy here, I'm going to pull the bottom edge to our new line, and then this straight line along the ruler. Just kind of fiddle with it and get it in the right spot, just like that, and let this do whatever it wants. And now we're going to tape it all down. Make sure all of this is flat. And see, we haven't changed the seam line there. I'm going to slip a piece of paper under here. I'm going to pick a soft piece of paper here so I can create my dart, just like this. So now we have a little neck dart here. So let me show you how to shape that. And now you have this dart pointing to this fuller area of your back. It's going to be a really nice shape. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to fold on the leg of the dart closest to the center back. So you see right there, we're going to fold away from center back. And so now this can be kind of fussy, especially since I have cardstock. So now we're going to pick this edge up and lay it onto the other leg over here. And I usually push down now of my dart here and make it flat. And I try not to fold my dart past that vanishing point. Let's get this nice and lined up. So I'm going to use a piece of removable tape to secure it, just like that. And now we're going to trim this edge here flush, just like that. And we can do our other pieces now too, since we have our blade in the hand. All right, let's take out the removable tape. You can also staple that dart just right here if you don't have any removable tape. And now you have your dart here. So down here at the bottom is your vanishing point of your dart. And then this is your 2 dart legs, just like that. So now you have a little neck dart. And when this is sewn, you can kind of see that it gives you this nice little cupping of your shoulder blade there, which is going to be really nice and comfortable. And we haven't changed your neckline, your sleeve, or your center back can now stay on the fold. All right, so let's look at the comparison here. So you can see that this really gave us some space here, sort of lifted it up and then gave us some contouring here. So if I bend this top piece of paper on top of this one here, if I bend it to kind of fit, you can kind of see that it's just bending over and you have this nice little contour. All right, so now let's do it for a flat or a concave back. All right, so same thing, but we're not going to be creating a dart. So we're going to put this right where we want it most, straight line across, and then a line into the neck, just like that. Hinge and hinge. So let's cut them both this time at the same time, because this one happens pretty much in one step. All right, so now we're going to draw on our center back here the amount that we want to remove. So we'll go down here. We're going to push our center back up to the ruler so we keep a nice straight line. And we're going to pull this edge here down while keeping it pressed up against the ruler here. We're going to let this overlap. This is what it wants to do. It's going to want to overlap just like that. Put a piece of tape in, secure all of these edges here, just like that. Now the only change we've made is we've made this neck back here a little bit smaller. So you're gonna need to adjust any collar or facing pieces. Facings are pretty simple. You can just lay them behind, trim off the facing, and I would probably either redraw it or trace onto the one you currently have, this shape. And for the collar, if you're doing something like a band or a collar, a band would lay flush with the body. You can adjust this between the center back and the back armhole notch, because there'd probably be 2 notches on the collar if you have a raglan sewing to this edge, because the raglan sleeve goes right here. This is the back and this is the front of the shirt, and this is the back half and front half, right? Because this is on the fold. So for something like this, like a band that we're going to be altering, or maybe a collar stand, even a collar, this is going to be the exact same change. And we're just going to measure this amount that we decreased our neck right here between the 2 dart legs. So I'm measuring from here to that other leg underneath. And we're measuring on the seam line down here at the neck. And then we're going to take that amount and cut it right off the back of our collars. And then this is our new fold right there. And these notches shouldn't change because we're only adjusting between the back shoulder and the center back, just like we did here. So if you have a rib knit collar, this collar piece isn't the same length as the neckline because it's probably a little smaller to be able to stretch on. So what I would do is I would take that amount of the dart leg, I'd probably decrease it by 20%, something like that. So if it's 3/8 of an inch, maybe I would only trim off 1/4 of an inch, something like that. We're talking about a very, very small amount. It's not going to negatively affect your rib knit collar very much if you're 1/16 or 32 of an inch off. I would take that amount and I just wouldn't take the full amount. I would take partial, so just a little bit under, and then make that my new fold line. And here's my rib knit collar, and we've decreased that amount, and now we can sew that in safely and it'll match the neckline. All right, so the last thing I want to show you here is if you want to make any kind of adjustments to the back, but you have a center back seam or you want to add a center back seam, you can get a really nice shaped back if you have a seam back here. We're going to put our cut lines in the same places that we wanted them when our piece was on the fold, but we're only going to do the first step in a couple of cases here. So for this one here, we can put it right at the neck. Same thing if we want the high round. If you want a low round, we can do it wherever we want, and we can also divide it up into a few. So if you have a pretty significant adjustment and you want it to be a little bit more gradual of a curve, we can divide it in half. So I'm just going to add one here, but you can add more than one. You can do whatever you want to this once you add a center back seam. It gives you a lot of flexibility. So now that we don't have to keep this on the fold, we're going to make a hinge right here, and we're going to cut from center back to the hinge, just like we've been doing. Cut up to the hinge. And now we're going to get a couple of pieces of paper. Now if we're spreading it apart, we're going to go this direction. We're going to increase it and we're going to fan these out. But if we were decreasing, we can do the same thing by overlapping the amount that we want, just like this. And we'd get more of an interior curve right here, and then we'd add our seam allowance. So for a more rounded look, we're going to tape this bottom edge first. Let's lift up our piece of paper here. And then we're going to extend our center back grain line for a little ways. Right, mark in here exactly how much you want to raise this up. Have a piece of tape handy, and we're going to pull this back right down to that point there. We're going to add our next piece of paper here, tape it to the bottom, or this edge right here, and do the same thing. We're going to extend our center back just from this section up, add our amount that we want to put in there, and then you can see my hinge came undone. We'll put this little hinge here. I'm going to hold it down, and we'll slide this to match, just like that. Make sure we keep it nice and flat. Tape this down. And now we have this nice rounded edge here. Let's put our piece of paper so we can add our seam allowance to the center back. If you already have some, you don't need to do this step. But if you're adding a center back seam and you don't want to have a center back fold anymore, this is how we'll do it. And now we're going to add our seam allowance along this edge, the amount that we want. And it should be slightly curved or gently curving. You want a nice smooth curve. Now if you're finding that you're only getting a point there, like it's a really steep peak, I would divide that up and put it in 2 cuts. And, you know, still keep it above probably where your notches are on your sleeve. Maybe just put one here and here, or maybe 2 closer together that are in the area that you need it the most. And now once you trim all these 8 edges and true them up, remember you still want a center back. And so now at the neck and at the waist, make sure you have a 90-degree angle right here. So get your ruler and make sure that this is all 90 degrees, same here, because these 2 edges are going to sew to each other. And you need to make sure that you don't get a point there. And you can always test it out by drawing in your piece, flipping it over, allowance there, line up the seam line there, and make sure that it's parallel to the other edge. Draw it in and make sure that you have a nice smooth transition at your neck and at your back waist. And none of your other pattern pieces should change. If you have a facing back here, you might want to double check it and make sure that it doesn't need to get a little bit bigger or smaller depending on if you made this flat or made it rounded. But your sleeve seam is the same and it should fit your sleeve just fine. You haven't changed your waist seam because this is all seam allowance here. Only thing you've really changed is the center back curve. So there you go. There's all your raglan adjustments. Happy sewing. I hope you're enjoying my Fitopedia fitting series, and if you want to get more fitting tutorials, just check the description. There's going to be links to more. And if you would like a printed version of these mini tutorials, just check the description or look under the video, and eventually you'll be able to make your own little Fitopedia booklet. And it'll be a really great, quick, easy reference to how to diagnose and fit the issue that you're working on. So I hope you're getting a lot out of the series. Please let me know, like, comment, and subscribe, and follow along for more. Thanks for watching.